Welcome back to Simply Scratch Kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Hannah, and today I'm really excited because we're going to be doing an emergency grocery budget meal plan. So we're going to be taking $25 to the grocery store to see how many dinners we can plan for our week. And spoiler, we got through the entire week. And so I'm going to show you everything I got and give you this meal plan. The whole meal plan is going to be written out in the description box below. So I really hope this will help you if you're in need of an emergency grocery meal plan. Just as a reminder, this is an emergency meal plan and maybe not the best meals to use all of the time, but what I did do was try to make sure that they were really balanced meals that all had some protein, that all had a really good amount of nutrients, vegetables, carbohydrates, and some fats as well, so that when you're in a bind, you don't have to feel like you're sacrificing all of your nutrition. And this is certainly going to be good nutrition to get you through a difficult week. So we're going to jump into it, and I'm going to show you everything I bought at the store for this week of meals. So I'm going to show you everything I got at the store for $26, and I'll show you why it was $26. But starting out, I got this 2.5 pound bag of frozen broccoli. We're going to use this in a couple meals. I got 1 pound of this mini penne pasta. So any really like 1 pound of pasta would work. This just looked good for my purposes. Have an onion, a box of macaroni and cheese. This was on sale for $1.49, so a pretty good deal. A can of baked beans and just the store brand. I've got 1 onion. We're gonna split up between meals for some extra flavor. There was ground turkey, but it was only a few cents cheaper than ground beef. So I decided I wanted to go ahead and go with ground beef. Your nutrient profile is gonna be a little higher if you can swing it. But if for some reason your ground turkey is a lot cheaper and you need to do that, feel free to go ahead and swap it out. I got this little over 2 pounds of chicken thighs. It's got the bone in and the skin on. We're going to use these bones. So a lot of times you get a little bit more bang for your buck if you want to try and do broth. I did a pound of peas and carrots. Mixed vegetables would work as well if that's a better deal. I got a pound of brown rice, and I went for brown rice just because it is a little bit more filling, and I personally prefer not to get the enriched white rice, which is what they had that was in my budget, so I opted for the brown rice. I got 1 head of cabbage, which as you're gonna see is an excellent filler for meals to really bulk it up for very inexpensive. I got a tub of sour cream. This wasn't like the biggest one, it wasn't the smallest one, right in between. And this was my great deal. These are all like grown in Texas, so not organic or anything, but I feel pretty confident in their quality. 5 pound bag of russet potatoes for $1.97. And this is why I ended up spending $26 instead of $25, because buying this 5 pound bag of potatoes was cheaper than buying like 2 individual russet potatoes. So we're probably gonna have some leftovers of these at the end of the week, but you could absolutely roll these over because of course potatoes stay good for quite a while, or you could roll them into, baked potatoes for lunch or fried potatoes for breakfast. So I felt good about that. Even though we're doing a challenge, I just couldn't stomach paying so much more for so much less. So this is the food we're working with this week, and I'm really excited. I think we're gonna get some really good meals out of this. Okay, the best part about this meal plan this week is that even though it is very budget friendly, there's actually going to be so little food prep that we need to do. Sometimes when you watch these videos, you're making everything from scratch, and while that can be really nice sometimes you need to be able to cook food really quickly. You may not have a lot of time and you still want to eat well. So all we are doing is actually prepping the chicken, just because that's going to save us a lot of time, but you could absolutely do this just like on the first night of food that you're cooking. So I've covered my chicken thighs with about 6 cups of water, and I am just going to turn this on with a lid. I'm going to turn it on to like medium and let this simmer and cook. I'm gonna give this about an hour for everything to cook through, just on a very low simmer. But obviously as soon as your chicken is done, feel free to take it out. But we're gonna save this water because a lot of us know how to make bone broth, but just boiling the chicken in water turns it into chicken stock. And we're gonna use some of that for cooking later in the week. So we're gonna kind of get multiple things done, 2 nights of chicken done, and broth as well. So I'll come back when this is done and show you what I'm gonna do when these are all cooked. Okay, my chicken is done cooking, so now I'm gonna pour this chicken stock off into a jar, and we're gonna use this for cooking later in the week. And then I'm gonna pour off about 4 cups that I'm gonna use for tonight's dinner. Anything left over, I'll just put back in the fridge. And then I'm gonna go ahead and pull all the meat off of these bones and store that in the fridge. And then I'm gonna pop these bones back into the pot and we're gonna make bone broth. You can use these bones more than once. I'm gonna split these pretty equally in half for the 2 chicken recipes we're making this week. So I'm gonna take the meat off of 2 of the chicken thighs and put them in 1 container, and then take the meat off the other 2 chicken thighs, and that's going to be our recipe for tonight. The chicken broth is going to be a little bit less flavorful than the bone broth, and so I'm going to leave some of that in the jar, but I'm also going to pour some of the broth back into the pot with the bones and the chicken skin, as well as some more water and about 1/4 of that onion as well. And then I just left this simmering on the stove for another 12 hours. Next, I am going to just chop up my onion into about 5 different portions. Don't ask me why I'm using a paper plate. I don't know. I just couldn't stand to do any more dishes this day. So I'm taking like 1/5 of this onion and throwing it in the broth, and then I'm going to chop all of it into just like fine diced pieces, and we're going to put it in a Ziploc bag in the refrigerator so this is ready to go for every meal, and so I know I'm not using like too much for one meal and run out before the end of the week. I'm done with all of my meal prep for the week, so at this point I'm just going to pause and clean my kitchen, and I will come back when it is time to make the first meal. For our first night, we're going to make a deconstructed cabbage roll. We're going to use our pound of ground beef, part of our bag of brown rice, a can of tomatoes, an entire cabbage, and our broth that we made. I'm just following the package instructions and making up 1 cup of the rice. While the rice is cooking, I'm going to go ahead and get started on chopping up my cabbage. So I'm going to use the whole thing and then just cut these large wedges out of it. And then I'm just cutting like a V at the bottom to get the core out of the cabbage. And then I'm cutting it into like little 1-inch strips. And I think this will be the perfect size and texture for this deconstructed cabbage roll recipe. At this point, I am realizing that my pan is definitely not big enough for all of this cabbage, even though it's going to cook down. So I went ahead and transferred everything after this to a large stock pot. I'm starting by browning up that pound of ground beef, and then I'm adding just like a handful, maybe 1/3 of a cup of these diced onions that we'd prepared, and I'm going to cook all of that together until everything is brown. I'm going to start adding my seasonings as this browns. I am going to do some garlic salt, obviously regular salt. We're going to do black pepper, and then if you have it, I think Italian seasoning is really good in here as well. When the meat is all browned, I'm going to add all of my cabbage into the pot. It's going to be really full, but then it's all going to start cooking down here. So this cooked for about 10 minutes until it was ready to add the rest of the ingredients. Once this is all cooked down, we're going to add our can of tomatoes. Now, I'm going to warn you that as many times as I looked at this can it did not occur to me that I intended to buy crushed tomatoes instead of stewed tomatoes. But obviously we made it work. I just smashed them up myself. But if they're the same price at your store, I would recommend getting the crushed tomatoes instead, because they are going to be a little bit more saucy and coat all of your ingredients better. Next, we're going to stir in the rice that we cooked, and then we're going to use that first batch of chicken stock that we made, the one that's maybe just a little bit less flavorful, but I'm going to add just about a half a cup to this along with the chicken fat that's on the top of it. It's just going to make this entire dish a little bit more flavorful since we are working with limited ingredients here. Once this is all combined, I just returned it to a boil, and once it hit a boil, this is all done. Be sure to season to taste. This actually made about 6 to 8 servings for us, depending on how big your servings are. Some of mine are kids, so you might just get 6 servings out of it, but it actually made a ton of food and is obviously packed with protein, fiber, and vegetables here. So this was a great bang for my buck. Okay, so for this recipe, we're going to use our entire bag of pasta. We're going to use these peas and carrots. We'll see how much we end up wanting to use. We're going to use part of our sour cream, 2 of those chicken thighs, and that chicken stock we just made. I'm getting my pasta water going so we can cook up that entire bag of pasta, and then I salted the water as well. We're going to add this entire bag of pasta, and I did get this mini penne, and this cooked up really fast, so if you are in a hurry, you can just get a smaller type of pasta, and that will really speed up the process as well. While I wait for the pasta to boil, I'm taking those 2 chicken thighs and just shredding them so they're all kind of the same size and will be evenly distributed throughout the dish. I'm going to bake these in the oven in a casserole dish, so I just got my chicken in there, and then I'm going to my saucepan to make the whole sauce for this dish, and I'm just using 2 tablespoons of butter followed by 2 tablespoons of flour to make a very simple roux. Once that has cooked for about a minute, I'm going to add a cup and a half of my chicken stock to this mixture, and this is going to boil for several minutes and it's going to thicken up into a sauce. So I'm just going to add my salt and pepper, and remember, we're going to need a lot more seasoning than normal with canned chicken broth that already has salt added. And if you have it on hand, I like to add a few dashes of thyme as well, just to give it that chicken pot pie flavor. As you can see, it has thickened up quite a bit now, and so I'm going to add 2/3 cup of sour cream to this as well. Normally when I'm making chicken pot pie, I will use just milk in this portion, but since we are on a different kind of budget, we're going to use that sour cream, and it's going to give it the same effect. But obviously, if you already have milk in your fridge, feel free to use that as well. Once that is all combined, I will add my frozen peas and carrots, and I'm going to do the whole bag, and I'm adding it to this pot mixture first so that those can start cooking through, and once we put them in the oven, these casseroles are going to bake up really quickly. If you didn't add them to the hot portion first, you're going to have to cook your casseroles a little bit longer to get that heated through. I ended up splitting up my pasta and chicken mixture into 2 different baking dishes. If you just had a large 13x9, this should all fit, but this was too much for my smaller baking pans. And so this larger one here, we're going to eat for dinner, and then I actually am going to freeze the other one because this ended up making about 8 meals at least. So I'm just pouring my sauce and vegetable mixture over the chicken and pasta and mixing them all really well. I just ended up putting these in the oven on 375 for about 15 minutes just to warm them through and cook that sauce into the pasta. These came out of the oven nice and crispy on the edges, but still a lot of good sauce there on the inside. This made a ton of food, like I said, so you can obviously keep eating these for leftovers the next day, but a lot of great protein, vegetables, and carbs again, even though this is a really inexpensive meal. Welcome to Wednesday's dinner, where I'm going to use my emergency meal for the week. I feel like you have to have this if you are going to plan to eat at home on a budget. You've got to have one really quick and easy meal that you can make no matter what is going on. This meal isn't hard to cook. I'm just cooking up the mac and cheese and heating up these baked beans. But this is a meal that we ate all the time as kids, and it's just extremely satisfying and delicious. My kids love to eat it, and you have to put the baked beans on top of the mac and cheese. This will definitely fill you up, and it'll get you through those days when you might need to get fast food instead. I'm going to roast up some of that broccoli for the side, so I like to mix it just in a bag here that I can reuse. So I add some olive oil or avocado oil in my seasonings, and I just shake up this bag and cook it in the oven. I roasted the broccoli for 25 minutes on 425, and here is our plated meal. It's Thursday, and we're going to make this creamy chicken and broccoli rice casserole. So we're going to use the rest of our brown rice. We're going to use those other 2 chicken thighs we shredded, some of our diced onions, some of our frozen broccoli, sour cream, and our chicken stock for this recipe. I'm using my large Dutch oven for this, and going to start by melting 2 tablespoons of butter and sauteing up about a 1/3 cup of my diced onions. Once these are nice and brown and crispy, I'm going to add my broccoli to the pan. I'm just using about 2 cups of this frozen broccoli, but we are definitely going to have some left over. One of the best things you can do when you're low on ingredients is just saute your food really well, because once you add that liquid to it, it's going to pull up all those delicious bits on the bottom of your pan, and you're going to have a lot more flavor for free. I found this in my pantry and decided it might add some nice seasoning to this meal. If you have paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, any of these things, all of that's going to enhance the flavor. You can really use any seasoning in this. Next, I'm going to add this chicken broth that we made, and we need 4 cups of liquid. So I'm just doing 3.5 cups of the broth, which is everything I had left, and then I'm just filling the rest of the 4th cup up with a little bit of water. Next, I'm adding my shredded chicken. This is 2 of these chicken thighs that we put up at the beginning of the week. Finally, we're adding 2 cups of our brown rice to this mixture, and then we are going to combine that, bring it to a simmer, and cover. This simmered on low heat for about 45 minutes. The key is to just make sure your rice is cooked all the way through and all of your liquid is absorbed. At this point, you're going to stir in about 2/3 cup of your sour cream, and then this dinner is going to be finished. This turned out super creamy and delicious. You've got your carb, your protein, your vegetable all in one meal. This was very filling, and we had, again, a ton of leftovers. For this last meal, I wanted to make a really easy instant pot potato soup. I just didn't want to spend a lot of time cooking on a Friday night, so I'm sauteing up about 3 pounds of those potatoes with some butter, some salt, pepper, and the rest of our chopped onions. And sauteing this first is going to add a little more flavor, and then we will add the remainder of our chicken broth to this. I'm just going to cover this and pressure cook it for 25 minutes. When it's done cooking, I mash it using a potato masher, but you can also use an immersion blender as well. And I combined the rest of that sour cream in there as well to make it a little bit more creamy. I decided I wanted it a little bit thicker, so I did kind of a cornstarch slurry, and I do like to use arrowroot powder instead of cornstarch, but both will work. You just do a little bit of that cornstarch with a little bit of water and return this to a boil and boil it until it gets to your desired thickness. And this was just a really easy potato soup. We ended up just serving this in mugs for a nice little movie night. If you have some bread on the side, that would be great as well. That wraps up our week of meals. I hope you found some recipes here that are both helpful and delicious for you. I definitely found some recipes that I think I'm going to add to my normal rotation, even though they're budget meals. It's definitely great to add a few budget meals here and there into your normal meal plan just to save a little bit of money at the grocery store. If you like these types of videos, be sure to subscribe and follow along so that I can give you more meal ideas in the coming weeks. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.